Good morning, students. Good morning to all. And last day we have started the chapter 9 Fiscal Economics. And in this chapter we have studied the subject matter or the scope of fiscal economics and the similarities and the dissimilarities of the private and public finance. So today just we will go to the next concept. Today we will study about the functions of modern state. Nowadays, our state also considered as a modern state. So this modern state always has some of the functions. The modern state is a welfare state and not just the policy states. Sorry, not just the police states. If the police states means one of the time or one course of time, the nations are considered as a police states only. The police states means it has some of the objectives to protecting the nations, from protecting the publics from the arrival of other nations only. But nowadays, all the states are considered as a modern states. The state assumes greater roles by creating economic and social overheads, ensuring stability both internally and externally, and conserving resources for sustainable development. So, by creating the economic and the social overheads, it has giving the greater roles and ensuring the stability both internally and externally means by bringing the stabilizations in the locals and the boundaries of the nations and the externalities also, and conserving the resources for sustainable development. Even if we have more resources, the more resources must be used to this bringing the sustainable development and some things. Under some headings, we can come to know about the functions of modern states. First, defense. The primary functions of the government is to protect the people from the external aggressions and the internal disorders. So, by the way of external aggressions means some of the other nations may come to our nations to bring in the war, and internal disorders means the poverty and the unemployment problem and some of the caste and religions problems. So, the nations must be providing the protections to protect the people from the external aggressions and the internal disorder. The government has to maintain adequate police and military forces and rendering the protective services. So it is the main functions of the modern state. Next, judiciary. So rendering the justice and settlement of disputes are the concern of the government. Some of the disputes are there. The government only have to settle and providing the justice for all the peoples as a equalized. So it should provide adequate judicial structure to rendering the justice to all the classes of citizens. Next, enterprises. The regulations and control of private enterprises fall under the purview of the modern state. So even if there is more private organizations and the private enterprises are there, the government only have to take all the responsibilities to regulate and control the enterprises. So ownership of certain enterprises and operating them successfully are the responsibilities of the government. Even though if the governments are providing the rights to conducting the enterprises, some of the most dominant or most important enterprises are controlled and undertaken by the government only for the purpose of providing protections and the unemployment problem and bringing the economic development. Next is social welfare. So it is the duty of the state to make the provisions for education, social security, social insurance, health and sanitations for the betterment of the people in the countries. So what are the things are the considered as a social welfare? So all the things have to provided by the government only. because the private organizations and the private nations can have no power and no rights, no interest to providing at all. So next, infrastructure facilities. So modern states have to build the base for the economic development of the country by creating the social and economic infrastructures. If the government want to bringing the growth and development, so that nations must providing or must creating the social and economic infrastructures. Social infrastructures means, as we have studied already, the education, social security, social insurance, health and sanitizations. And the economic infrastructures means, so what are the things are needed to improving the economic development? All these things are considered as economic infrastructures. The transport facilities, road facilities, and the proper monetary and fiscal policies, and the proper consolidations of the holding lands, everything also considered as social infrastructures. Next, macroeconomic policies. The government has to administer fiscal policies and monetary policies to achieve macroeconomic goals. Already we have studied, if any of the government want to achieve their macroeconomics goals, so that nations must bring and implementing the proper macroeconomic policies. Macroeconomic policies mean the monetary policies and the fiscal policies. By bringing and implementing the proper or the so peculiar monetary policy and the fiscal policies only, it is possibilities. Next, social justice. During the process of growth of an economy, certain sections of the societies gain at the cost of others. So whenever nations are going to reach or attain the base of one of the boom level of the trade cycles, some particular people only will get most benefit and other peoples will not get the benefit. So when the government also have to take the effort to bringing the equalizations of the societies, all the peoples have to get the good communication skills and the income and the employment opportunity. The government needs to intervene with the fiscal measures to redistribute the income. So in which way the government can arranging the redistributions of income? It is must be taken by the government. Next, control of monopoly. So concentration of economic power is another evil to be corrected by the government. So the state intervenes through the control of monopolies and restrictive trade practices to curbing the concentration of economic power. So the nations has more possibilities to increase the economic development by the way of providing the privatizations. But in the same time, so the government also have to take the responsibility to controlling the monopoly powers. And in fine, the state can play three kinds of roles to controlling the monopolies and bringing the economic development. As a producer of goods and services, the government only has the power and became as the producers of the goods and services. So many goods and services are produced and distributed by the both government and private. But even though if the government only is there to providing the goods and services, it is good. Next, as a supplier of public goods and social goods, the government only has to undertaking all the responsibilities to supply the public and social goods. Next, as a regulator of the systems, what are the economic system or the political system and what are the systems are there? So all the systems also have to regulate by the government. So under the 8 headings, one of the modern states providing the functions or taking some of the functions. Next, public expenditures. The public expenditures refers to government spending incurred by central, state and local governments of a country. If you are considered a countries, the country includes the local government, the state government, and the central government. By together these three authorities, organizations only is considered as a government. So these three governments also have to spend some of the money to bringing the economic development. And these three organizations also spending the money to providing the public welfare. So the how much amount of the money is going to spend for the public welfare by these three organizations is considered as a public expenditures. If the governments are spending the amount to the public, that is called public expenditures. So the public expenditures can be defined as the expenditures incurred by the public authorities like central, state and local governments to satisfy the collective social wants of the people is known as public expenditures. Some of the individual, not only the individual people's wants is considered as a public expenditures. The collective social wants of the people. If the governments are satisfy the collective social wants of the people is known as public expenditures by providing some of the facilities or the social welfare. Next, classification on public expenditures. So we can easily classify the public expenditures as a two way. First, the public expenditure is classified on the basis of benefits. So the two type of economists or the two economists, the Gohan and the Blahan, have classified the public expenditures on the basis of benefits into the four classes. By understanding the benefits, we can classify the public expenditures. First, public expenditures benefiting entire societies. The public expenditures benefiting the entire society. For example, the expenditures on the general administrations, defense, education, public health and transports, and hygienics and sanitations. Everything's also made by the government for all the peoples without any discriminations. Next, some of the public expenditures conferring a special benefit on certain people and at the same time common benefit on the entire community. First one is administrations of justice or etc. If you are having the good justice, some of the particular people will get more benefit. Particular people mean if any of the peoples are bothering about from any of the problems, he will get more benefit, and because of that other people also will have the confidence on the government, and he also have some of the benefit. Next, public expenditures directly benefiting particular group of persons and indirectly the entire societies. For example, social securities, public welfare, pension and unemployment relief. So the peoples, those who all as the problematic situations, these peoples will give the more benefit, and because of that other peoples also indirectly will get the benefit by providing the unemployment relief funds and the pensions and other suspensions. Next, public expenditures conferring a special benefit on some individuals. For example, subsidy granted to a particular industries. Some of the government providing only for the particular people, providing the public expenditures, providing the spent on the particular peoples only by providing the grants and the subsidies to the farmers and the cottage industries peoples and the handicraft artisans. And because of that the particular people also will have the benefit. So under the benefit the government have to classify the government expenditures is classified. Next, classifications on the basis of functions. So Adam Smith classified the public expenditure on the basis of functions of the government. So under the three headings, the public expenditure is going to classified on the basis of functions. First one is protection function. So this groups includes public expenditures incurred on the security of the citizens to protect from external invasion and internal disorder. For example, defense, police, courts, etc. So already we have studied the functions of the modern state is providing the protections. So many problems will be arised from the external and even in the internal problems. So whatever may be, the government only have to take the responsibility to protect their peoples. So on the basis of protection functions, the government or the the expenditures of government can be classified. Next, commercial functions. So this group includes the public expenditures incurred on the development of a trade and commerce. For example, development of means the transport and communications, etc. So we have studied already the government also have to take some of the organizations, some of the responsibility to conducting the commercial organizations. Nowadays the police and the development of transport and communications, the BSNL and the railway transport and all the bus transport is also undertaken by the government. So even if there is possible to get the revenue, they have to need of making the public expenditures on the development of commercials and trade. Next, development functions. So this group includes the public expenditures incurred for the development infrastructure and industries. So normally the development is coming from the infrastructure facilities provided by the government. If we want to absorbing the international monetary fund and the foreign direct investment, or even our local government industries want to increase or want to develop in the particular time or within the short period, the good infrastructure facilities must be needed. So on the basis of the development functions also we can classify the public expenditures. So the public expenditure is going to classify on the basis of functionally protection function, commercial function and development functions. Next, causes for the increase in government expenditures. Why nowadays the government expenditure is going to increase means some of the causes, some of the reasons only the government expenditure is going to increase. So under the following headings we can come to know about the reasons of government expenditures. First one is population's growth. During the past 77 years of planning, the population of India has increased from 36.1 crore in 1951 to 121 crore in 2011. So as we have studied already, the increasing the population growth always required the more government expenditures, because whenever the population growth is going to increase, the increasing populations must be required the food and employment problems and the social infrastructures like education, colleges and some of the infrastructure facilities. The growth in population requires massive investment in health and education, law and order, etc. And not only that, the young population requires increasing expenditure on education and youth services. Whereas the aging populations requires transfer payments like old age pensions, social security and health facilities. Now, what are the expenditures made by the government for the public? It will be increased whenever the population is going to increase, right? Next, defense expenditures. There has been enormous increase in defense expenditure in India during the planning period. The defense expenditure has been increasing tremendously due to modernizations of defense equipments. Nowadays, all the nations are producing the vehicles and the protective equipments like a gun and some of the atoms and other materials. And our nations also now beginning from the developing nations to developed nations. So we also will be in the need of having the more weapons. So the government also has to protecting and has to increasing and has to strengthening the defense. So the defense also will be have the more expenditures. The defense expenditure of the government was 10,087 crores in 1991, which increased significantly to 2 lakhs and 95,511 crores in 2018 and 19. Next, government subsidies. The government of India has been providing subsidies on a number of items such as food, fertilizers, interest on priority sectors, lending, exports, education, etc. Because of the massive amounts of subsidies, the public expenditure has increased manifold. So normally the government has to providing the subsidies for the priority sectors like agricultural and cottage industries and the retired Indian Army ex-servicemen. So when they are providing the subsidies for all that these peoples, it has to being in the need of making the expenditures. The expenditures on subsidies by central government in 1991 was 9,581 crores, which increased significantly to 2 crores 29 lakhs and this 750 lakhs crores is increased in 2018 and 19. Next, debt servicing. The government has been borrowing heavily both from the internal and the external sources. Internal and external sources means whenever it has the possibilities to earning the income by selling the debentures and the shareholders to the public, it can collect it. And it has the chance to borrowing the fund from the World Bank, the international organizations such as IBRD, World Trade Organizations and United Nations. As a result, the government has to make huge amount of repayment towards the debt servicing. So if we have the power and the rights to borrowing the money, it has to repay the money with the interest. So they have to take the more expenditures. The next, the development projects. So the government has been undertaking various development projects such as irrigations, iron and steel, heavy machinery, power, telecommunications, etc. The development project involves huge investment. If you want to bring or implementing the social infrastructures, they have to taking the important projects. For bringing the important projects, the government has to be in the need of or it will become as a huge investment nations. Next, urbanizations. There has been an increase in urbanizations. In 1950 to 51, about 70% of the population was urban based. But now the urban population has increased to about 43%. So there are more than 54 cities above 1 million populations are began to urbanized areas. So the increase in urbanization requires heavy expenditure on law and order, education and civic amenities. So now, so once upon a time, so all the peoples are spread throughout the world, throughout the cities or throughout the regions. So so many of the peoples are living in the rural areas only. But nowadays, all the peoples are coming from the rural areas to urban areas. But the 47% of the peoples are living in the urbanized areas only. So the government also have to take the more responsibility to make the expenditures to providing the law and order and controlling the populations and providing the employment opportunities in these urbanized areas. So the government has to take the responsibility. Next, industrializations. So setting up of basic and heavy industries involves a huge capital and long gestation period. So it is the government which starts such industries in a planned economy. The underdeveloped countries need a strong of infrastructures like transport, communication power, fuels, etc. and like that. So whenever the industrializations are going to increase, so we have to make the good infrastructure facilities, then only the industrial sector will be increased. The strong of infrastructure like transport, communication, power, fuels, etc. is needed to the underdeveloped countries for the improvement of industrializations. Next, increase in grants in aid. So, increase in grants in aid to state and union territories. So, there has been tremendous increase in grant in aid. Grant in aid means to the grants and subsidies to state and union territories to meet the natural disasters. So, whenever the natural disaster is arised or occurred, the government only have to take the more responsibilities to recovering that people from the losses of employment and providing the foods and other amenities. So by these eight reasons, one government have to arranging the more expenditures. Okay students, I think it's enough. If you have any doubts in these causes of increase in government expenditures and the classifications of public expenditures, just please ask me, and just to take the causes of government expenditures as your study portions. Thank you.